Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to make it to today's event. So we are here hosting some of the LA City Council District 5 candidates, and we're talking about homelessness today. So we can go to the next slide. This is our agenda for today. We're just going to do this quick welcome right now and then jump right into panelist questions. We will be giving panelists 2 minutes for each question. There are 9 questions in total, and we have 4 candidates with us today. We've separated our sections of questions into the following: getting to know our candidates, talking about existing efforts and community building opportunities, and then finally looking forward and opportunities for growth. So we can go to the next slides. These are the candidates that we have here with us today. And our first question will be getting to know them. And so I just wanted to make a disclaimer that we don't have all the candidates here today. Sam is not here today, but we will be asking for a recording or a statement if you would like to provide one. So without further ado, let's jump into the questions, which I'll give to Andrew to take away.
Awesome. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So I'm going to be kicking off the questions quickly as well. If everyone else can please keep their mics muted throughout so we can absolutely hear all the candidates as we go through and ask the first set of questions. Okay, so we're going to start off with just introductions. So the first question is just going to be getting to know you. So if you can share your name, your preferred pronouns, and top 3 goals for the community. And just a reminder that each candidate has about 2 minutes to answer. And we have Pamela, who's going to adamantly keep time so that we're not here for 4 hours. So the first question that I will address that to, and we're going to rotate the order, is going to be to Molly. So again, just an introduction, your name, your preferred pronouns that you want to use, and just your top 3 goals right now that you have for the community.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. My name is Molly Basler. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm a native Californian and LAN, born and raised. My top 3 issues are homelessness, affordable housing. I believe you can't say one without the other. The climate crisis, and people and animal welfare.
Thank you. Next, same question. Now we have Jimmy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Biblarz. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm so excited to be here and see some old friends and new. I'm running to make Los Angeles a place where everyone can afford to thrive. For too long, our city is focused on short-term fixes built around election cycles. It's time to finally ask, how can we solve our most pressing problems once and for all? I grew up just down the road. I know it's on Zoom, the proverbial road, I guess, in a small duplex apartment in the Pico Robertson neighborhood. Adolescence is brutal for everyone, as I'm sure everyone on the call can remember. But for a scared gay kid amidst the anti-LGBTQ politics of the mid-2000s, it was really bad. But things got so much worse when I was 12, when my family was evicted from our home. The landlord wanted to turn the duplex into a single-family McMansion. I'll never forget my mom coming into the room I shared with my sister. She was crying and she asked me, "What are we going to do?" I knew even then, at 12, that there had to be a better way, that no one should have to worry about where they were going to sleep at night in a city as wealthy as LA. I've dedicated my life to fighting the rise of inequality ever since, and on city council, I'll fight to make this a city where everyone can afford to thrive. My top 3 goals: first, combating homelessness. That means adopting a robust Housing First program that prioritizes empathy and compassion, investing in permanent supportive housing, deploying sustained outreach, and building anti-poverty programs that stop people from sliding into homelessness. Second, addressing housing insecurity, particularly among renters who make up the majority of CD5, That means building more diverse types of housing and holding developers' feet to the fire on affordability requirements. The most effective climate strategy to reduce our city's tremendous carbon footprint is investing in denser housing. Anyone serious about climate change needs to center housing policy in their plans. And third, racial justice. We can't let up on last summer's efforts. That means
Thank you, Jimmy.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I can't share. I didn't share a timer, so it's awkward to cut you off this way. But sorry, you're at time. Thanks.
And next we have Scott.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Epstein. Pronouns are he, him, his. Thank you so much for putting together this forum on one of our city's most pressing issues. I served as the chair of the Mid-City West Community Council for 7 years, and so I deeply appreciate your service and the work you do to engage your stakeholders and address the issues facing our community. I'm running for City Council because I believe this moment requires leaders who are connected to community and committed to progress. My main 3 goals for CD5 and Los Angeles are as follows. 1, we need to build an affordable city that is accessible to all. That's what we're talking about tonight. LA needs to be a place that everyone can call home, not just the most privileged among us. Number 2, we need to work aggressively to address climate change by building a more sustainable city. And number 3, we need to bring more voices to the table, because we will only be able to solve these pressing issues if we engage a broader citizenry in building change.
Thank you. And next we have Katy.
Thanks so much for having us here today. It's so wonderful to finally be having conversations about the issues that we're facing. My name is Katy Young Yaroslavsky. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And my top 3 priorities are as follows. My first priority is to reduce the inflow into homelessness by prioritizing homeless prevention programs and targeting resources that we know work. Preventing homelessness is significantly more humane and also happens to be much less expensive than allowing people to fall into homelessness in the first place. And until we figure out how to slow the rate at which people are falling into homelessness, we're continually going to be digging ourselves out of a hole that keeps getting deeper. My second priority is to bring better, more sustained coordination between the county and the 5th Council District on service provision. So much of our work around homelessness requires that collaboration between the county, which provides mental health services, public health services, addiction services, and the city, which has mostly been focused on housing provision. And one of the things I've seen as a policymaker in Supervisor Kuehl's office is that council members who understand the importance of that relationship are more effective at addressing street homelessness. And because I spent 6 years at the county, I know where the money and the resources are, and I know what programs are available, and I know who to call to make sure CD5 is getting the resources we need. Third priority, I'm an environmental attorney and climate policymaker, so not surprisingly, my third priority is to make LA more climate resilient and sustainable. One example of how we do that is, for example, our relationship with DWP, the largest municipal utility in the country. We have an incredible opportunity to leverage DWP to transition our water and our energy infrastructure to be ready for a warming planet, and to do it in a way where we're centering equity at the fore of all we're doing. I'll also work with LADOT and other departments to increase tree canopy and access to parks and green space and safe alternative transportation like dedicated bike lanes, safe street crossings for pedestrians, and so on. There's a lot of work to do. I'm really, really excited for the opportunity to do it as a legislator on behalf of our 4.5 million people.
Thank you, Katy. Sorry, that time.
Awesome. Thank you, candidates, for the introduction. We're going to move right along, and we're actually going to jump right into a question that's on a lot of folks' mind, or an issue rather, and that is, how do you feel about LA City Council's recent update to Municipal Code 41.18, which would prohibit sitting, lying, or sleeping, or storing, using, maintaining, or placing personal property in the public right-of-way. And so we're going to mix up the order again, and let's go first with Jimmy.
Great, thank you for the question. You know, I think it's simple. This ordinance is not going to improve conditions for the unhoused. Instead of continuing to pass short-term fixes, it's time to address this issue at its core. Local policy must be designed to actually help people get off the streets and into safe, permanent housing. 60,000 unhoused people in one of the world's wealthiest cities is a crisis. People need safe places to sleep, financial support, mental health services, and help battling the demons of addiction. This ordinance will not fix that. First and foremost, the Ninth Circuit ruled in Boise v. Martin that cities like LA cannot move people off the streets without offering them a place to go. So the legality of this ordinance is seriously in question. We can't simply demand that people be moved off the streets without offering them a place with real services. Even if the ordinance were legal, we would be spending money to move people only to see the same people return in no better shape than when we forced them out. Passing a hollow ordinance that won't do anything to actually solve the problem is not the solution. This ordinance is emblematic of the city's failed approach: criminalize poverty and focus on short-term thinking that is counterproductive. When I was at the LA Public Defender's office, I saw unhoused clients shuffled in and out of jail for minor infractions. It was horrific to watch: an unjust, expensive system that preyed on the poor, the majority of whom were Black and brown. This ordinance provides more opportunities to harass. We must always remember, too, that homelessness is not a colorblind issue. Black and brown people are overrepresented in the unhoused population, as are LGBTQ people and young people. If the city adopts an ordinance like this one, it targets these communities disproportionately without offering any real hope of solving the problem. We can create a city that is free of encampments, that has enough housing for everyone, and that stops homelessness before it starts. 4118 is not a step forward toward these goals, it is a step backwards. I would have voted no. Our city council can and must do better. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Next, we will go to Scott.
So I've been vocal in my opposition to the past ordinance, and it's wrong, and it won't solve the root problem of our homeless crisis, which is that people need homes. We don't have nearly enough beds to house the over 40,000 people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. Now the city is saying that what unhoused people are doing to survive is a crime, it's illegal. That is tremendously damaging to the trust that we need to build to connect our unhoused neighbors to the resources and services that they need to get back on their feet. And that's why our homeless service providers are so dismayed by this new ordinance. As Nithya Raman has also described very well, this move bakes in a disjointed system where every council member is working on in his or her own district, when in fact what we need is the exact opposite: a coordinated approach across council districts, levels of government, and sectors. The ordinance is also so broad in its reach that it opens up abundant opportunities for abuse by bad actors. Let me be clear. I support a framework that takes into account both the severity of the needs of our unhoused neighbors and place-based challenges like encampments when we decide how we allocate our resources. We need coordinated action to address existing encampments. And there are a number of models around the city that are showing promise, including tiny home villages in the Valley, Nithya's work on eliminating the Hollywood Berendo encampment, and Mike Bonin's work, his program Encampment to Homes. But this draconian ordinance will not do that. We don't need it. It's not a tool we need, and it won't solve the problem.
Thank you. And next we will go to Katy.
Thanks so much. So it's unconscionable and untenable that we have people living on the streets and in encampments across our city. This new ordinance doesn't move people off the streets or get them connected to services, and it doesn't affirmatively tell people where they can be, which is a big problem. That's where the focus should be. At the same time, we do need more tools. And if this had been amended to be explicitly paired with street engagement in the law, which they talked about doing, but didn't actually do, and include a requirement that housing or shelter and services be offered, it would have been a more effective measure. It would have made more sense to adopt strong street engagement and right to housing ordinances at the same time. At this stage, I think it's really important that we do that as quickly as possible. to make the already passed 4118 part of a more comprehensive housing first approach. I'm concerned that alone, and if not used properly, will have even further fragmented policy that moves people without homes from one neighborhood to another and then penalizes them for being homeless. I think the larger problems are the need for better regional coordination, as Scott just mentioned, and more nimble options like rent subsidies. I would have modified the motion to include this comprehensive strategy. I do support Mark Ridley Thomas's motion that he introduced last week, which recognizes that street engagement teams need adequate resources to help transition unhoused people into long-term supportive and affordable housing if they're going to be able to make a real impact in addressing the homelessness crisis. His motion establishes the Housing Now Fund, which is an initiative which the county and the city will partner on to provide a supply of rental subsidies and supportive services for at least 10,000 people experiencing homelessness. I support that.
Thank you. And next we have Molly.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I do not support this ordinance in any way. I do not believe that we criminalize our unhoused fellows, and that once again, in the wealthiest city, one of the wealthiest cities in the world, that we have a humanitarian crisis and a public health crisis is a travesty. And it keeps getting worse. And we keep throwing money at it. We keep criminalizing these unhoused fellows, and nothing changes, and it actually gets worse. So I want to sort of say, why is that? Why is our city, the way it's been governed, has created this mess, this quagmire ultimately? And everyone, this is the new, the new statement. Everybody says it's very complicated. So is sending people to Mars and going to the moon, but people do it. And we need a new way to govern our city. Also, to no longer have people in our government, local government, taking money from developers. It is, and building more luxury development when we have people on the streets. We need to only build affordable housing, green and regenerative housing, so it is not adding to the climate crisis. And I just believe that we can do this. And the fact that it's taken so long is, I believe, in the way that our city has been governed, and we need to change that. We need to put people in there, leaders who are not, with the developers, because that to me has been the biggest issue, is the developers, overdevelopment, creating gridlock, creating more climate crisis, putting more people out on the streets, and then throwing, criminalizing them, creating more of a problem. So thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, candidates, for those answers. That leads us right into our next question, which is, what services, existing and new, do you plan on supporting and implementing to mitigate homelessness in CD5? And we're going to start with Scott on this one.
Thank you, Andrew. So the first thing that I would say is that, city council is different from being a state legislator. And council members must be champions for place-based solutions in their districts. And so you can be sure that in the first 100 days of office, I will be working with communities to push forward local solutions. That would include neighborhood access centers, so that our unhoused neighbors have a place to connect with services in CD5, and CD5 is a service poor district. That would include temporary housing models like tiny home villages, safe parking, and safe camping, so that our unhoused neighbors have access to security, showers, storage, services. And that would include working aggressively to locate opportunities for permanent supportive housing. The other thing that I would say, and this is really important, is that our housing and homeless crises are inexorably linked. The evidence is clear that the driver behind the ballooning of our homeless crisis in the last decade and a half is the growing unaffordability of LA. It is essential that we take serious action to address our housing crisis, which City Council has failed to do. That means stronger renter protections to stem the tide of evictions. It means legalizing affordable housing types like SROs and micro units. It means reducing the cost of new construction by streamlining processes and approvals and eliminating parking minimums. It means updating the transit-oriented communities program to leverage even more below market rate units. If we don't get serious about housing, more and more Angelenos will fall into homelessness every day. So it doesn't matter how much we do in terms of permanent supportive housing, we'll be creating new homeless folks every day. So we have to think about these issues in concert, and the city has to finally get serious about supplying the housing that we need.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Katy.
Thanks. So there's no one silver bullet for addressing homelessness. We need to be both helping to connect people living on the streets to housing and services and slowing the rate at which people are falling into homelessness. As I talked about in my opening statement, we need to prevent people from losing their homes in the first place. This is a huge priority for me. Right to counsel, tenant anti-harassment protections, a much larger emergency grants program. These are all areas where I'd put significantly more resources. Our homelessness prevention budget is so much smaller than our housing and services provision for people who have already fallen into homelessness. And we need to be spending lots of money there, but we should also be focused on homelessness prevention. At the county, our office spearheaded a pilot where we targeted housing insecure seniors in the San Fernando Valley. And through significant outreach and connecting folks to services and resources before they fell into homelessness, we kept a huge percentage of people housed who otherwise would have become unhoused. And so the value proposition is there. We've shown that this works and we need to do more of it. We also need mental health services and substance abuse resources in every part of the city for housed and unhoused people. We need to make sure people's basic needs are met. Folks need access to restrooms, storage for their stuff, trash service, and showers. And we really improve our public spaces for everyone when we provide unhoused folks with these basic human essentials and do it in a place where they're secure. We also need to make big investments in building affordable housing. We're building luxury housing at a higher rate than we need and building affordable housing at a much lower rate than we need. And we're allowing at the same time for the destruction of rent stabilized units all over the city. This is a citywide issue and the whole city needs to step up and identify solutions in each of our communities. And in many cases, this won't be ground up construction, which is really expensive. It's going to be adaptive reuse, hotel, motel conversions. They cost less than new construction and are faster to get occupied. We also need tools like safe parking and camping. We need a range of options to get people off the streets right now because living on sidewalks and in drainage tunnels is unacceptable.
Thank you. Next we have Molly.
Sorry, hi. So I would like to put a moratorium on luxury development for a year or more, however long it takes. Only building affordable, green, regenerative housing. I think the day has come for radical measures because this problem has gotten so out of hand. And we keep throwing, like I've said before, money at it, services at it. We need to get these people off the street. We need to repurpose old buildings too that are empty. I've driven around the district. There's so many buildings now empty, open fields that are empty where we can start building affordable housing, also mental facilities for the mentally ill, get them taken care of, and the people who are addicted to drugs and alcohol. Get them in rehab centers and train them jobs so then they can go out and maybe become a homeless advocate, rotating out from homeless into becoming a thriving citizen. And you know, there was a time when we did have mental facilities and they were closed. They were funded by federal money. So I'm looking back, you know, studying more of that. Why haven't we gotten the federal money again to open those facilities? Get the mentally ill off of the streets, take care of them, drug and alcohol, because there's different populations with different needs. And we need to look at each one and get them safe housed, not, throwing more. I mean, I believe in, yes, taking care of them services, but we have a lot of those. What we need facilities, housing to get them off the street. And I believe one of the ways is to moratorium on the developing and only focus on the affordable housing, green and regenerative.
Thanks, Molly.
Thank you. And next we have Jimmy.
Thanks, Andrew. When you look at places that have, made real inroads in addressing homelessness, they all do the same thing. They work to get at the heart of the issue rather than slapping Band-Aids on the problem. And that means, for me, three things. First, a housing first model. Housing first is pretty simple. It means no matter what issues people have, addiction, poverty, mental illness, you deal with that after getting people into housing. Everything is easier to deal with when people are housed. In LA, we often put these onerous restrictions on getting people into housing, sobriety, restrictions on bringing possessions and pets, and that discourages people from going into housing. Second, invest in permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing tethers housing and services. They are located in the same geography. Counseling, job training, and addiction treatment become easily accessible to residents. Too often here in LA, services are concentrated downtown, and housing sites are dotted throughout the city, making it extremely difficult for residents to access services, given limited transit options. Permanent supportive housing is about dignity, something that we all deserve. And third, targeted, sustained, and individualized outreach. Right now, the unhoused have little reason to trust city government. Why would they when they live in constant fear of being swept off the street with nowhere to go? We need to invest in sustained service outreach that addresses each person's individual needs. We need to invest in service providers who use real-time, person-specific data to get to know every unhoused person by name and target efforts and resources accordingly. We've seen that work with St. Joseph Center in Venice and with the approach taken in Hollywood at the Brando Street encampment. What I've just sort of laid out is really about getting currently unhoused people into housing, but to actually solve the crisis, the only way is to get to the heart of the issues and address the housing precarity that propels people into homelessness. And I hope that we can continue to talk about those issues in later questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And now I believe I'm passing it over to Rohini.
Yes, so we'll go to our next slide, which leads us into our next section, which is existing efforts in community building. And for this next question, we're going to be using an audio clip. And so we'll have you listen to the following clip from Julia, who is an unhoused resident of Westwood Park. And we want you to consider, how would you respond to Julia if she said this to you? And what do you think about her statement?
Apologies, 1 second.
Never. I don't think they can't really grasp their mind around it because they see what they see on TV, but they don't see the other side of it. It's not just like all dirty and drug addicts and stuff. These people are like war veterans. They're not on drugs. They're not on anything. It's just like it's just kind of like camping out. And then you got nice people like you, and there's people that come and they give you like food, and it's like it's not. I hope to change. I hope you change how people see things. So I thank you for that.
No.
All right, so for this first question, we're going to start with Katie. How would you respond if Julia said this to you? What do you think about the statement?
Yeah, so to Julia, I would say, thank you for sharing your story and your perspective with me. I'm grateful for your willingness to share, and I'm glad you found a place where you feel comfortable and safe. Sharing your story helps to remind people that each unhoused person has their own story, their own perspectives, and set of circumstances that led them to find themselves unhoused, and that everyone therefore needs a different set of solutions to successfully transition into housing and services. Living on the streets, even if it's in a nice park, it's not healthy or safe, despite the relative safety and comfort you might feel here. And as your councilwoman, I'm going to work with you and a team of people to get you connected to the housing and services that you need to really thrive. So that's what I would say to Julia. And in terms of what I think about this statement, look, it's absolutely critical to really listen to what homeless people are saying they need. They're our clients and our constituents. And when I listen to this statement from Julia, I hear that she feels safe in the park and has her basic needs met for clothing and food and community. And so we need to make sure that these fundamentals are met wherever Julia goes next. The housing and services we provide need to do this, and they need to be flexible enough to do this for other people too, each of whom will have a different set of needs and preferences.
Thank you, Katie. So we'll turn it next to Molly.
Thank you. You know, I would say to Julia, you know, what I got from what you're saying, Julia, is that, you know, yes, we do sometimes have this idea of the homeless, like she said, right? They're on drugs, they're dirty, they're this, they're that. And some of them are not. So that is what I said in the last, you know, answering the last question was, you know, about some are mentally ill. That's a different thing. Some are, you know, just out of their house because of, you know, difficult times. I myself, you know, I come, you know, went to good schools, did everything. And I came, I was divorced and I bought a house, and then I, you know, started a business, and I found I couldn't pay my mortgage, and I understood how easy it is, that fine line of having everything and then having it all taken away. And that is why I can be so compassionate with people and understand that how Julia and others can end up in a park. And then, like I said, different populations, taking care of them in different ways, but all of them need to be housed and taken care of and be safe. And, you know, like I said, it's a humanitarian crisis and it's a public health issue. And, you know, like I responded to Julia that way. And what do I think about this statement? I think that, you know, once again, it is, so many people really don't understand what the homeless go through unless they've, you know, not that you have to, you know, walk in everybody's shoes to understand that. That comes from our humanness, our humanity, our compassion. So I, you know, stand with her, and, you know, we need to house these people. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn it next to Jimmy.
Thank you. To Julia, I say this isn't your fault, that you matter, that I'm going to fight for you and not blame you for the failures of our city and our country. That I'm sorry it feels that people paint with a broad brush and don't recognize that people's paths into homelessness are very different. I will do everything I can to get you into housing that works for you and connected with services that you need. I will try my best to make sure that policy recognizes that while some people experiencing homelessness suffer from mental health conditions, and those people need the right services to help, others are on the losing end of poverty, on the losing end of an eviction. When I worked at the Harvard Square homeless shelter, I talked to a lot of people with similar messages to Julia's. The one I heard most often was that so many policymakers and service providers do paint with that broad brush and treat all unhoused people like their trajectories into homelessness are the same, and it's just untrue. People become unhoused for so many reasons. Being on the losing end of that eviction, being released from jail with nowhere to go, being kicked out of the house for being gay or trans, untreated mental health issues, difficulties reacclimating after combat. These different groups required tailored policies. For some, subsidized housing might be the right tool, particularly for housing insecure families. For others, especially those who have been unhoused for decades, the emotional toll of housing is, of course, going to be severe, and policy needs to recognize that. I think the biggest takeaway from Julia's statement is that we have to listen to people. Lisa Delpit, an education theorist, has one of my favorite lines, that we have to recognize that people are experts on their own lives. And too often with homelessness, we fail to do this and act like the voices of the actual people experiencing homelessness don't matter. I will work every day on city council to change that and to make sure that people like Julia are not falling into homelessness faster than we can house them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then next is Scott.
Thanks for the question and for capturing this point of view from one of our unhoused neighbors. You know, I think my fellow candidates have covered this pretty well. You know, what I would say to Julia is thank you for your story. Thank you for sharing your human experience with me. And I think it's essential that we center those stories in our policymaking. You know, I'm a researcher by trade. So, you know, I do things like conduct interviews and focus groups. And you know, far too often, our policymakers are not talking to the people affected by these policies at all. And so, you know, that's got to change. I know there's a question on that later, but that has to change. You know, the other thing that I would say is we have to listen to the details of these stories. I mean, Julia is saying that of the options available to her, this is the safest that she has access to, right? And so, you know, we have, and current policymakers have answered that with, oh, that's against the law. That's against the law. You're in an area that is considered a sensitive use. So you're a criminal now, and I'm going to cite you. And so that, and you know, I think what we learned from this conversation too is that, you know, this is the first engagement. There have to be many, many engagements to bring somebody into services and housing. And so, you know, we have to listen and we have to engage and we have to offer a situation that's actually better than the situation that the person currently is in. That's our problem in this city.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you so much. So for our next question, we'll start with Molly, and the next question is, how will you unify the existing efforts around homelessness? So I'll start with you, Molly.
Okay, thank you. I mean, for me, it's about, you know, I'm a community organizer, so it's all about existing efforts, unifying, bringing people together, and bringing the communities together. And I think our current leaders have not done that, and they tend to hide out instead of coming down and meeting the people, and meeting the Julias and listening to what their needs are and the communities. What I would like to do to unify existing efforts around homelessness is I want to be transparent, and I want to be accountable as a council person. I want to have town hall meetings every other month in various spaces around District 5 and allow people to come, the housed and the unhoused, and to unify. I mean, I just think unify also the council, that we're not pushing back on each other, that we all come together for the greater good of all. The greater good of all. The housed, the unhoused, the people, the planet, so that we're all being taken care of for the grander scheme of things too. Because what we do in District 5 also affects all of them. We do not live in a bubble. So I think, and Scott had mentioned this in one of his answers to, I think one of the first questions is unifying also the council, unifying our communities and giving them a voice to really add that people are heard. And so then I can lead with that people come first. People come first over profit. People come first in always, always, always.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. And then we'll turn it to Jimmy.
Thank you, Rohini. You know, these disjointed efforts can really have pretty serious consequences. When layers of government and direct service providers aren't on the same page, the consequences can be damaging. First, you have duplication of services, which creates more bureaucracy and promotes waste, makes services more difficult to access through already a maze-like bureaucracy. But what's worse is when different bodies have competing visions for what should be done, one arm risks undermining the other. So I think we need unity on two fronts, vision and structure. We need a coordinated approach where city council staffs aren't operating in silos, but are actively engaging and cooperating with county staff, LASA staff, and local service groups that often have long-term relationships with people experiencing homelessness. To start with vision, we first need to get everyone on the same page. Right now, there is so much division about what the actual problem is and what its causes are. But there is more agreement than disagreement. No one wants people living in encampments. No one wants people to die on the streets. Everyone wants more housing. There are real solutions that we know work. Housing first, permanent supportive housing, sustained targeted outreach, and anti-poverty programs. Getting everyone on this same page is the only way to get to the heart of the issue. And in terms of structure, I think too often people have this idea that if we just organize things this way over that, everything would be solved. But in studies of places that have made real progress on homelessness, community leaders always say the same things. They got on the same page about what the collective project was, and they had a centralized body that was able to execute that vision, that was empowered to make change and publicly accountable. The siloed approach has such limited efficacy, especially because homelessness and poverty do not respect council lines. I want to see more coordination among city council offices, among layers of government. This will make it easier to identify the needs of each unhoused individual and to scout new locations for permanent, supportive, and affordable housing sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Next, we'll turn it to Scott.
You know what I would say is that working on city council is where policy meets place. You know, and the city council has a tremendous amount of power in this city, right? That can be used for ill. That can be used via the wrong approach. You know, we saw in Echo Park a military style approach to dealing with homelessness. You know, hundreds of police officers. I wouldn't want that in my community, let alone how the unhoused folks were dealt with in that park. But it can also be used for tremendous good. You know, I think we need, and I think we're seeing that with folks like Nithya Raman, who are, you know, making connections between the nonprofit service provider sector and government, also between council offices. She's working with Krikorian's office on a number of projects that straddle the districts. And so there's no magic solution except leadership. You know, and city council members have a lot of it in Los Angeles. It's a city council town, not a mayor town. So you can bet that I will use that leadership to connect folks and make sure that we're solving the problems on the ground that are happening. Of course, there is also a lot of work that we need to do from a governance point of view. We know LASA is disempowered. It's a sort of this orphan body that's partly under the jurisdiction of the county and partly under the city. And so we really have to have some serious conversations about governance and how we structure. But, you know, I think that the 100-day solution is council leadership.
Thank you, Scott. And then next we'll turn it to Katy.
Thanks very much. So our current homeless response system is fractured because we have this mismatch between the problem or problems and the governance structures that are in place to address the problem. And so while new governance structures come with additional bureaucracy. And having spent the last 6 years at the county, I know something about bureaucracy and its downsides. I do think this is an issue that is sufficiently complicated and politicized and cross-jurisdictional that we really need a new governance structure. So for that reason, I support the concept of a new regional homeless authority like what Senator Kamlager is proposing with SB 679. Alternately, we need to really reform LAHSA so that it can meet the crisis that we're facing. And when LAHSA was created almost 20 years ago, it was a much different problem that they were solving for, and they had much different powers than what we need them to have now. And then we need to fund whatever it is that we create or fix, and then not undermine it. And in the meantime, we need to put our, as Scott mentioned, we need to put our egos aside and start to collaborate. We unify efforts and coordinate better through investing in the relationships that allow for closer coordination. So for instance, I'll work really closely with the next supervisor in SD3 and with Supervisor Mitchell to make sure the county's service provision is working hand in glove with the city's efforts. And I'll work proactively with the cities that touch CD5. So Culver City, West Hollywood, and Beverly Hills. From my time at the county working on regional policymaking, I have deep relationships across the region, including with those cities, and it's not just the electeds, but also staff. And I'll focus on coordinated services and collaborative problem solving. So one example, I had a good conversation with West Hollywood Council member Seppi Shine a couple weeks ago about coordinating around public bathrooms, among other things. And you know, this is how we do it. We invest in relationships and not caring about who gets the credit. And when we do that, we make progress. And along those lines, just really quickly, we need to be partnering with Congressman Ted Lieu's office and our California senators to get the VA to do its part. We have more than 3,000 homeless vets. Most of them don't qualify for federal benefits because they received a non-honorable discharge. I'll partner with our federal representatives to push for the feds to take responsibility and help us with vets.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll go to our next question. What mechanisms will you use to gather and maintain feedback from housed and unhoused stakeholders? And we'll start with Jimmy.
Thank you so much. To really get to the heart of the issue, you've got to go to the source and learn about people's experiences, learn where they're at and what support they need. I'm a social scientist and I love data, and I think policy must be guided by it, and we must collect data in a variety of ways. Talk to people, conduct surveys, and track results over time. For gathering feedback from our unhoused neighbors, I think we can really look to community-engaged organizations for great models of how to gather feedback and do research. Robin Petering is a community-based researcher. Her group Lens is deeply engaged with the unhoused community and has done tremendous work gathering information on trajectories into homelessness, homeless demographics, and youth violence. What I like best about her efforts is that it starts with trust building. Her team works to get to know unhoused people, learn about their needs, and then begins collecting data formally. I think it all comes back to sustained outreach. The way I see the landscape, you have council office staff, county staff, LAHSA staff, and community service groups. We want these groups involved in data sharing so that no one falls through the cracks. I will work to make sure these bodies are aligned with their data collection practices, working together to get to know unhoused individuals, identify their needs, connect them with the right services, and follow up to make sure those needs are being met. And in terms of gathering feedback from our housed neighbors, I will work to be as present in these communities as possible. Council districts are large, but they're not impossibly large. And the fact that so few people know who their city councilor is unsettling. It's why voter turnout is historically so painfully low in these elections. I'm about meeting people where they're at and not making government hard to access. We want to make feedback as easy as possible, and that means more time for public comment at council meetings, digital feedback tools, holding council meetings across the city, and pop-up outreach throughout the district. This campaign is about bringing in people, and that's the exact same thing I'll do in the District 5 Council office. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. And next for this question is Scott.
Thank you for the question. It's a great question. Let me start with unhoused folks and then go to housed folks. So like I said, I share a social science background with Jimmy. You know, so I think we really need to be collecting information from our unhoused neighbors. And it's not enough that we do good research. We have to use it too, right? So we just had a huge policy making bungle, in my opinion, with 4118. How would that have looked different if we actually centered the voices of people that are unhoused? If we asked people before we made this big shift in policy, you know what, if we were to say that here and here and here and here and here and here, it's illegal for you to sleep, would that build trust? Would that make you more likely to go to a neighborhood access center, to talk with a service provider, or less likely? I think we might have arrived at a different conclusion if we centered those voices. In terms of the housed community, you know, I am a guy who has spent the better part of a decade engaging communities. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I turned a neighborhood council that was mostly about saying no to things, saying no to new housing, saying no to affordable housing, saying no to new mobility options, into a council that said yes to things. How did we do that? We brought more voices to the table. We created more engagement opportunities, not just a contentious meeting about a land use item, but maybe you would like to volunteer for the homeless count. Maybe you would like to canvass your street to ask people to water trees so that we can have new trees in our parkways. In all of these ways, we bring more people into the public policy making process. And that's how we're going to get the progressive change that we need.
Thank you so much. And then next is Katy.
Thank you. So much of our actual homeless service provision is undertaken by people who have no lived experience, as others have mentioned already. And even more troubling is the fact that most of our homeless policy is being created by people who don't have any lived experience. Advocates with lived experience are asking for things that aren't being done, and that's a problem. Grassroots organizations are really good at doing this work, and my office will work with outreach workers, both LASA and grassroots organizations, to make connections with people experiencing homelessness, inviting them to the conversations, insisting that they be centered in the work. Having listening sessions at encampments, paying people money to fill out surveys and weigh in. We need to create feedback links between people in interim shelter, for example, so they can share feedback about what they're experiencing. So one example is the shelter's policy on visitation making you feel isolated? What can we do to make that less so? I'll make sure we elevate the voices of the community impacted by the policies and programs and make sure they're meaningfully driving implementation. And that doesn't just include our unhoused neighbors. It also, of course, includes housed constituents. And there are all sorts of ways that we engage meaningfully with our housed constituents. Scott mentioned neighborhood councils. That's important. There are a bunch of other ways we can do that as well, using networks that are already established, so we're not reinventing the wheel on interacting with folks across the district. At Supervisor Kuehl's office, we've made a real concerted effort to keep in very close touch with our providers, and we make sure to always include unhoused and formerly unhoused people on panels and on advisory committees informing policy. And I'll insist that we do this in CD5 and at the city more broadly. These voices need to be central to how we make and implement policy. And of course, they can't be done at the exclusion of people who do have homes. And so everyone needs to be at the table. And unfortunately, formerly homeless people and homeless people have been underrepresented there.
Thank you, Katy. And then next is Molly.
Thank you. You know, I just think that we need less talk and more action. We know we need to house the unhoused. And sometimes the house stakeholders don't like, you know, the idea of affordable housing going into their neighborhoods and so forth and so on. And it's interesting because I have a few friends who live in affordable housing, and it's gorgeous. I think this stigma of the, you know, unhoused and affordable housing, like it's going to look like some shanty town, is just, we've got to show how stakeholders that is not the case. But we need to get into action, and we need to gather and maintain feedback. We know that people want to get off the streets. It is a humanitarian crisis and a public health crisis. We need to build housing. We need to repurpose buildings. And what Katie had said about Ted Lieu, because I had thought about that too, and the veterans and using that huge piece of property, on San Vicente and Wilshire, that could house veterans, and repurposing and using. We have all of it before us. We know we have the feedback. We need to the time is now. We need to get into action. It's sort of like the climate crisis. I mean, the climate crisis is here. It's not something out there. It is here. We are in a mega drought. We're running out of water. Farmers can't plant their crops, and that is going to affect the districts tremendously. So we need action. We need to build affordable housing. As I always say, green and regenerative building. It's a whole new way of living now that we have with the issues of LA. We need to really get into action and bring everybody together. And like I said, in town halls and group settings. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. So we'll move to our next question, which is the last question of this section. We'll start with Scott. How are you interested in working with neighborhood councils specifically?
Well, this is an issue very near and dear to my heart. Working in my neighborhood council was my entry into this issue. So when I became chair of Mid-City West in 2014, one of the very first things I did was LASA reached out. It was the first year that LASA was reaching out to neighborhood councils to organize the homeless count, to opt in. And as soon as I got that email, I knew that we had to opt in. And, believe it or not, now it seems like an obvious thing, but at the time there were naysayers. Well, yeah, this is not what neighborhood councils do. Neighborhood councils weigh in on land use items. No, this is about local governments. This is what we're going to do. Through that work, I became the deployment site coordinator for the homeless count 2 years in a row. I was recruited to start a homeless coalition, the Midtown Los Angeles Homeless Coalition, which is now a 501c3 nonprofit, and has done a lot of advocacy work and connected housed folks to services and housing. And so I think that there is tremendous opportunity to work with neighborhood councils and other groups for positive change. And I think it should be around public education. It should be around citing locations for temporary and permanent supportive housing. It should be around, community engagement and how do we change people's mindsets and open people's minds to, how we can adopt a housing first strategy. And so, look, we need community engagement to solve these problems because, in Los Angeles, our problems are often around political will, not around resources or lack of good policy ideas. And City Council has failed to have the political will to move forward.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Katie.
Thanks very much. Look, there are a lot of ways a council office can make change and foster relationships to build community. And one of the things I'm most interested in with the council job is the idea of using the council office to create space and support and otherwise foster community building. And so much of the homeless work is happening on our streets, not behind closed doors necessarily, and in our communities. And neighborhood councils know their communities better than just about anyone else and can help inform what resources are needed and in which places. Neighborhood councils provide one of the most local perspectives to a lot of these issues and can facilitate community discussions, education, advocacy, and actual physical solutions. So there's so much we could do together in partnership. One example would be to have a series of town halls through our neighborhood councils and focus on surfacing the issues that you're seeing in your own communities and bringing those issues and possible solutions to my office's attention, and then we can implement those in partnership together. I'm interested in strategically providing real resources to our neighborhood councils above what you're already getting, so that neighborhood councils can, in partnership with community-based organizations and local businesses and other local groups, work to address what they're seeing on the ground instead of just having to call my office and say, this isn't working here. It's like, well, how about we provide some tools so that you can work with our office and working with others, service providers, can work to address those yourselves and making sure that the resources are there. So to the extent there's interest, some of that work can be happening through or in partnership with our neighborhood councils.
Thank you very much. And then Molly.
Yes, because I'm a community organizer. I love gathering people working together. I believe there's power in numbers. So neighborhood councils, I was a member also of the Mid-City Neighborhood Council where I met Scott, and I've worked with some downtown LA. And I just think that the more unity we can have, the community level going all the way up with our neighbors, neighborhood councils, the council, the more action that we can get into and support each other. I just think it's really important that we all come together and also educate people on, that there are so many people, don't even know about neighborhood councils. They don't know about the council. We need to educate people, our community too, about who's out there doing what. I love town halls, gathering people together, educating people to inspire them to change. Because if our leaders aren't doing it, and I'm also a big believer in leading by example. There's nothing that I ever ask when I'm talking or working on a community effort that when I ask people to change, that I don't do it myself. I think the leaders need to lead. We need to be out there leading by example, getting to know our community, educating people on neighborhood councils, on the council, who their council person is. And I also found too, I talk to people all the time in dog parks. And I always say, do you know who your council person is? Most of them don't know their assembly, don't know their district they live in. So that really needs to change, because that's why we keep getting elected the same thing over and over, because people don't really know what is going on. So we've got to, get together, neighborhood council, love it. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next is Jimmy.
Thank you so much. Neighborhood councils are a wonderful tool for local participation, and it is heroic work. I was chair of Hamilton High School's school site council many years ago, sort of like neighborhood councils for schools. And I remember that experience well. Long meetings, well into the night, overworked and underappreciated volunteers. And I've been in enough neighborhood council meetings over the years, especially on Zoom, to know that it's the same feeling. The work is often thankless and draining. So let me start by thanking the North Westwood Neighborhood Council again for organizing this and for all your work. It is political participation at its purest. My view of the neighborhood council, city council relationship is that communication should be frequent and sustained, and that issues neighborhood councils bring to City Hall should always be responded to. Otherwise, my goals for neighborhood councils are threefold. First, encourage more participation in local neighborhood council elections. When you're new to town or a neighborhood, it can often be hard to tap into an organization that's doing good community work. And we need to educate people about what neighborhood councils are and about what they do. Second, and relatedly, engaging members of neighborhood council homeless committees to participate in one-on-one outreach work. Many members of neighborhood councils are already doing this, but formalizing a process whereby neighborhood council members can become trained as homeless liaisons and work directly with LASA and council staff engaging our unhoused neighbors would be wonderful. And lastly, promote participatory budgeting in Los Angeles. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, I experienced participatory budgeting firsthand, and it was a wonderful tool of democracy. It really felt like the old Puritan town meeting, And participatory budgeting is a process through which community members directly decide how to spend part of a public budget. In LA, we could let neighborhood councils lead this charge. While we have the Budget Advocates program here, participatory budgeting gives the people final say in how resources are actually spent rather than just being advisory. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I'm going to turn it to Andrew to lead us into our next section. And thank you to all the audience members for your time, taking time for this event.
Thank you, Rohini. And we are now jumping into our last two questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So now we're going to look ahead. We're looking forward. And the next question that I have is, what challenges do you anticipate may pose a barrier to initiating and delivering effective and sustainable solutions? And how do you plan to overcome those challenges? And we're going to start with Katy for that question.
So we've been talking for the last hour about many of those challenges. Fractured governance, concerned neighbors who don't want homeless housing or affordable housing or bridge housing or service providers in CD5. People are frustrated with what they feel like is a problem that keeps getting worse, and they want homeless people moved off the streets yesterday. It makes it very hard to make progress in the way that we need to when there's so much polarization around the issue. Then there's, of course, the splintered provision of services and housing and strategies across our 15 council offices. I could go on, but I don't need to. In terms of how we overcome these challenges, it sounds trite, but the way we overcome these challenges is through competent and experienced and ethical leadership, which is, I think, why we're all here. I'm not intimidated by these challenges. In fact, that's why I'm running. I'm interested in and experienced in solving complicated, seemingly intractable problems. So how do we do this? We focus on problem solving. We take it piece by piece. We don't get overwhelmed by the enormity of the challenge at hand. We don't care who gets the credit. We collaborate, we listen, and we insist on humanizing our unhoused neighbors and educating our housed neighbors and working all together, listening to everybody. And we bring the energy and singular focus to the issue that the urgency of the moment demands. And we don't wait for other people to step up and do that work. We do it ourselves right now.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Molly.
Thank you. The challenges, oh my gosh, I just think, I think we need leaders who are leading and leading by example. And I think one of the major blocks is special interest in our local government and allowing leaders that govern, getting sidetracked and getting gridlocked, and not being able to deliver services and affordable housing. I mean, that's what I said from the very beginning. Why have we not been able to solve this problem after all this time? And we keep talking the same talk and we keep throwing money at it and HHH and all of this stuff and nothing changes. Why? And why do we keep getting gridlocked? I think once again, it's unifying the council, that we're all on the same page, that we're not going to get seduced by special interest or big developers, and that big developers start to learn to build affordable housing, that there's that our humanity is more important than profit, that people become before profit. And that will open up a lot of different things, and it will open up the gridlock. And how do I plan to overcome these challenges? By leading and hopefully inspiring others to do the same, to not sell out, to not sell out our constituents, which I find to be so outrageous that we have people on the streets tonight that may not have food, who, not just living on the streets, but dying on our streets.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll go to Jim.
Thank you, Andrew. In the face of so many escalating crises, we have to stop addressing our biggest problems with Band-Aid solutions built around election cycles. We have to think structurally, bigger, bolder solutions for our most pressing problems. One of the biggest challenges I imagine facing is the tendency towards short-term thinking in politics. I'm a sociologist. In my world, it's all about balancing short and long-term thinking. It's all about identifying structural causes and then permanent solutions. It's about getting to the heart of the issues. And I think that's really a communications battle, and the onus is on elected officials to explain and educate people about why investing in medium and long-term solutions is essential, even if the benefits aren't always felt immediately. What I can tell you is this: I will work every day to communicate the need for long-term investments in social policy, sustainable solutions that will make this city a place everyone can afford to thrive. That means permanent supportive housing, public housing developments, and bolstering tenant protections. It means designing our land use and transit policies with affordability, access, and climate at top of mind. And it means recognizing that housing prices have vastly outpaced wage growth, creating the tremendous housing squeeze that we see today. And there are other challenges too, of course, most notably a culture of corruption in City Hall that prioritizes real estate developers over people. And that's why we need a new generation of progressive leaders who are not afraid to take on entrenched power and work to make City Hall accessible to all and representative of all Angelenos. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And next we'll go to Scott.
Well, we have a host of challenges, but I want to speak about one that hasn't been mentioned so much, and that is resources, because we do have limited resources. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, which has drained our resources, which has, you know, puts our small businesses through tremendous pressure. That means lower tax revenues. And so we need to be smarter about the resources that we do have. So I want to bring it locally. So we had a tragedy in Beverly Grove, where one of our house members of our community was killed by an unhoused community member who was having a mental health episode. So cops were able to arrive at the scene multiple times, but weren't really able to do anything. Mental health capacity response was not there at all. Hours and hours and hours for a mental health team to come and try to deal with the situation. And then we had this tragedy. And so we need to talk very seriously about how we reallocate resources from things that are not working to things that will work. Okay, you know, I mean, so that's a serious part of the conversation. And by the way, I think most rank and file LAPD officers are not excited about responding to mental health emergencies, are not excited about responding to concerns about, you know, this unhoused person is in front of my business. And so I think that there's actually a lot of consensus around this reallocation of resources, although the police unions might disagree. But we need leadership to actually figure out how to shift those funds in a smart way. I'll do that.
Thank you for that. So we're going to move to our next and last question before final comments. And that question is, what will you do differently from past and current LA City Council members to ensure that you are pushing pragmatic and compassionate solutions? And within that, what can you realistically do as a CD5 council member to address homelessness? And for this one, we're going to start with Molly.
I think, yeah, I mean, throughout this entire forum, I've been, you know, talking about how I will lead differently. What will I do? And one of them is not take money from special interests, attempt to put a moratorium on developers, luxury developing, which I know will be a big pushback. And that's, you know, that's realistically like CD5 as a council member, can I address that? Can that actually happen? But like I said, trying to get people together on the council, agreeing to these things, and the developers also, not forcing things, but letting it flow, and from talking things out and then getting into action. Like I said, we've talk and talk and talk, and the time is for action in all areas. And I've said too, which is the compassionate solutions, pushing pragmatic solutions. It's about also getting people together and connection, town halls, meeting people, getting out and meeting the unhoused, and and coming from a place of our humanity, not just pushing papers, passing laws, about coming from our humanity and putting people first. And realistically in CD5, you know, I think that is part of the problem too. It gets into gridlock. And I think the leaders do start out with good intentions, and then somewhere it gets locked up in a mess. So I have to look at that. And then, like I said, if we all can agree and come together rather than separate, I really believe we can do anything, and we can change our city and make it really a green, progressive place, which it is not. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Jimmy.
I'd just like to say again, thanks so much for having this. I think it's going to be a great year, and thanks to my fellow candidates. It was so fun to meet all of you, and it's going to be fun to be on the circuit together. To distinguish myself from past council members, first, I will stop treating homelessness like a criminal problem. This is a moral problem, a deep moral failing, and that has to be our North Star on this issue. I also bring to the council important lived experiences that are too often underrepresented in government. I lived through an eviction. It was horrific and destabilizing for our family system. It felt like the earth had fallen out from under us. When so many in CD5 are 1 or 2 paychecks away from not being able to pay their rent, I believe we need these experiences in government. No one has experienced the housing crunch more than young people, who are priced out of LA more and more every day. Entry-level jobs are nowhere near sufficient to afford rent in this city. It's incredibly demoralizing, feeling like you live here, but you can't really call it home. My approach to policy also is different from past council members. I think about problems structurally. On our most pressing issues, I always ask, how do we solve this once and for all? Until we start thinking structurally, we're never going to see real change. And the campaign for change will still be incredibly difficult. There are powerful forces that don't want change, deep divisions about the best course of action. But I can promise you this, I will never take this job for granted, and will wake up every day laser focused on how to make this city more affordable for everyone. Together with a new generation of progressive leaders, I believe we can make this city a place where everyone can afford to thrive. Thank you again so much for hosting, everyone. Please be in touch. You can find out more about me at jimmybiblarz.com. I promise we always answer. And again, just really looking forward to this year. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me through our website.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Scott.
I think what makes me different from prior council members is that I will be laser focused on solving our actual problems, rather than courting to the concerns of a small minority of vociferous opponents of progress. So let's get into an example that's very close to North Westwood. So we haven't talked about this tonight, but among our unhoused neighbors are unhoused UCLA students. We don't know the actual number, but it's substantial. Think about that. In the top-ranked public institution in the country is housed in the most expensive housing neighborhood in California, and I believe maybe the country as well. And students are having to worry about whether to buy books or housing. That's a tragedy. And let's take a real example of how the university is trying to address that crisis. So they have a very ambitious program to build new housing on campus. And one of those projects was downsized. And the number of beds for students that are badly, badly needed was diminished. Did the university have to do that? No, they actually didn't, because it's not a city entitlement. It's state land. And yet this culture of courting to wealthy interests, and not just wealthy interests, but the concerns of just a few people that were claiming that this project was going to mar views, ended up downsizing this project voluntarily, right? So we need to change that culture. We need to be laser focused on solving actual problems, on solving affordability, not concerns about somebody's view.
Thank you for that. And next we'll go to Katy.
First of all, thanks so much for putting this on again. It was a real pleasure to hear everybody's perspectives and thoughts, and looking forward to many more of these over the next 9 months or so. So look, I fully understand and appreciate that we need all levels of government at the table working collaboratively to solve this problem. I'll coordinate really closely with the county and the state, my colleagues on the council, our neighboring cities. I have those relationships. I know how to collaborate. I've done it effectively. I understand how to solve regional problems because I've been doing the work at the county for the last 6 years. I know how to leverage county services and dollars, and will leverage my understanding of the system to bring resources to the Fifth and the city more broadly. I'll focus on proven strategies. There are certain things that are working, and we need to keep doing those things. Homelessness prevention, housing first solutions, and make sure that all levels of government are paying their fair share of a problem that was not created by the city council and cannot be solved solely by the city council. And while this problem feels intractable, it's not. I wouldn't be running if I wasn't optimistic about our ability to make meaningful progress on this most important of issues. And I'll bring a regional perspective and understanding to solving a problem that really does need that regional perspective. I also spent a decade in the private sector, and so I understand that the private sector does certain things really well. And we need to partner with businesses, affordable housing developers, neighborhood councils, and community-based organizations to marshal all of our resources, all of our shared knowledge, all of what we do best to intelligently tackle these issues. And I'm equipped to hit the ground running on this issue and so many others, and I'm looking forward to doing just that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was the last question, but now we're going to offer candidates about a minute each for last comments, how folks can get in touch with your campaign, etc. Anything else you'd like to say. And we're going to, offer that to each of you. We'll start with Jimmy. Any final comments for the audience before we close?
Yeah, just to reiterate some of what I said in the closing, I think this is the #1 issue affecting our city. I think it affects all of us in so many ways. It's inescapable, and until we start getting our heads straight about it as a city and as a set of communities, we're never going to make inroads and have a city where everyone can afford to thrive. So I'm eager to talk to anyone who wants to. Like I said, I'll put my website in the chat, and please check us out, come to our events, and have a good night.
Thank you. Scott, any final word?
Sure. I'll just say that I'm a renter. I'm a young dad of a toddler, and I have struggled to remain in the community that I've spent better of a decade, my volunteer time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours. I have lived in housing that was poorly maintained, that was really unfit. I had very little in the way of power to change that because renters have very little power in the city. And so I understand the struggles that people have in this city. And we don't have those voices on the Los Angeles City Council. The council is filled with people of great privilege. And so if you want somebody that understands your struggles and will fight for you, I am your candidate. You can learn more about my candidacy at scottforla.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Katy, any final words?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks so much to all of you for being here on a Thursday night. I imagine that there are lots of other things competing for your time and attention, and this is probably your 10th Zoom of the day. So thanks for being here. It's an important issue. It's the biggest issue we're facing, and I'm grateful that you've made the time to get to know us and how we tackle these challenges in our own ways. I want to echo what Scott just said. Actually, I think it's really important that you get to know all of us as who we are and what we bring to the table. I have 3 little kids, 6 and under. My husband and I rent, and LA has felt like it's an increasingly difficult place to raise a family, and we're committed to staying here. We want to be here. We will be here. And part of why I'm running is because I'm frustrated with how hard it feels. And we have so much relative to others, so many others, and yet it still feels really hard. And so I think it's important that you take the time to get to know all of us as who we really are, and which is why I'm so excited about these series of conversations we'll be having over the next 9 months or so. And like I said before, I've been working at the regional level, 10 million people, policy making at the county, which has been an incredible privilege, but it's also meant that I haven't been working at the neighborhood level. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you, and would be incredibly grateful for the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one. And so if you're interested, please reach out. The campaign website is katy4la.com, KATY4LA.com, and there's a connect button, so you can get in touch with us. The email address is info@katy4la.com. Would love the opportunity to get to know you and your friends and your networks. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we'll go to Molly for final comments, and then I'll pass it to Rahini to close us out.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you all for being here and listening to us. And I'm born and raised here, like I said in the beginning, born and raised in Los Angeles. I have had a lot and I've had a little. I own a home, but I had to move out. I rented it. Thank God I was able to save it through friends and family. So I'm an owner and I'm a renter, both in District 5. And I know what it's like to be a single woman trying to be out here on my own. So I have a lot of empowering women doing it. I'm divorced. Started a business, small business, and I really want to serve the people of Los Angeles. Even in my small business, I was always reaching out. I worked with women in domestic violence shelters, women coming off drugs and alcohol, really being a voice. And I do agree with Scott that, and I think Jimmy also said this, that our council is full of people who have no idea really what's going on out there.
Thank you, Molly.
Okay, so, and you can reach me at mollyla2022.com. Thank you.